welcome everybody to the podcast. Which camera am I looking at right here? Welcome to the podcast, Life Speaks. And today we have a special episode that we're going to be doing. First of all, I want to say I'm your host, Luis Perez, aka Huicho Breach, and I'm here with my co-host,
Casey
Case. And so today we have a special episode that we're going to be running, being that it is September, and September is Suicide Awareness, Suicide Prevention Month. And so me and my producer were talking about it. It'd be a good idea to do a table discussion on suicide in general, the effects, what comes out of it, the feelings, the emotions that come from that, and how do we get help, or where is the help and the hope? And the reason why is because there's been just a lot of talk, a lot of articles, a lot of we've experienced a lot of different situations where suicide just seems to be very, very prevalent. It seems to be like the ultimate choice, the ultimate cure-all for a lot of people. And so, what we have here this evening is we have, a panel of people that are acquainted to us, are close friends of ours of the church, that have very close experience with suicide, whether it is attempting suicide or dealing with the suicide of a loved one or a friend. And so we wanted to get their take and their insight on their perspective on what transpired, how did they endure it, all the background behind it, and where was the hope, or where did they find hope to go beyond that attempt, and to see what help we can lend to someone that might be out there and viewing whoever it is that is teetering on the precipice of death, looking for hope and looking for answers. So I want to welcome everybody here this evening. Thank you for being here with us. And so we have evangelist Richie Valerio with us, a good friend of mine, Erica Gutierrez, which is that correct, Gutierrez still?
Soon to be Garcia.
Okay, Erica Garcia, and so we'll edit that in there. She's a member of my church, and then we have my sister Jennifer Hernandez. She's also a member of my church, and so we want to welcome her. And also today we have a very special guest. Our producer Daniel is going to be participating in this tabletop discussion on suicide, and so we want to welcome everybody for being here and being a part of it. So, one of the first things that I wanted to discuss, I want to talk about is, in my experience with suicide, I remember this was back in 1998, right before I graduated high school, and I had this friend of mine, her name was Cynthia Gonzalez. We're good friends. We were, in school, everything was fine, everything was good. And I remember, one day I come to school and there's like this uproar in school. Everybody's freaking out. People are crying, and I'm walking down the hallways trying to get to my first classroom. And there's this friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, this girl, Cindy, and myself. And as she sees me walking down the hall, she's like, "What happened? What happened?" And I'm like, "What happened with what?" Like, it was early in the morning. I was like, "What are you talking about?" She was like, "What happened with Cindy? What happened to Cindy?" And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so I was kind of like, she seemed upset, like maybe I did something to her. And so then I walked into my classroom, and the teacher had made an announcement that one of our classmates had committed suicide the night before.
Was she a popular girl?
I wouldn't say. I mean, I don't know if she was popular or not. I mean, I don't think that's relevant. I'm just, the point is, she committed suicide, and everybody's life went into this uproar. This confusion. This, why, how come? And in my mind, I'd never experienced anything like that. And so in my mind, I'm like, what the heck? Like why? Like where? How? I had all these questions. The first thing was just questions upon questions, and all her friends were coming up to me, and they were like, what happened? Because we had recently, just prior to this situation, we had just gone out to the movies together. Me and her friends. everything seemed normal, everything seemed fine, and then one day she's just dead. And so, one of the things that transpired was that I was, in my mind, I'm like, why did this happen? How could have this happened? Like, did anybody, and there was all these stories floating around about it was because of this, it was because of that. She had this kind of circumstance, she had this kind of issue. And everything was like a question, and no one had any answers. And so I remember feeling very, very hopeless. I'm seeing her friends, and I remember going to the viewing, for her viewing, and see her family there. She had a brother and a little sister, and I mean, the whole family is just like devastated. I mean, I've never seen such devastation in my life. I mean, I'm talking about these people were just devastated, broken. I mean, I've never heard crying like this before. I'm talking about some blood-curdling crying. It was just a surreal thing to me. And I remember I was there with a friend of mine, and we went up to the casket to see her body. And as we're going up to the casket, there's a family member of hers that's there. And as he's kind of looking at her, he kind of just sighs real loud. And he's like, Cindy, man. Like, you know what I mean? And I remember seeing that, and that engraved like really, very, like very vividly in my head. And it was just this hopelessness, like, why? Like, what could have been so bad that you decided to take your life? Like, what could have been so horrible and so unbearable, and back then I wasn't saved. I didn't know anything about Jesus. I didn't know anything about the church. And so I think back now, and I'm like, what if, someone could have been saved, I could have been saved, and I could have shared, the hope of Jesus Christ? Would have been different, what things have turned out different? Would she have survived? Would she have confided her problems in me and say, you know what, and I'll be able to tell her, there's hope? Would she still be alive today? And so these questions, believe it or not,
did anybody ever find out what she was going through?
Till this day, these things still plague me. Like, till this day, these things still affect me. Like, I still wonder, like, why, where, like, how come, like, where was the hope? Where were her parents? And I saw the devastation that her parents had, and I saw how everything, I think she was about to turn 16 or something.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember. They buried her in her dress that she was going to have the celebration, like you know how they do that,
Sweet 16,
something like that. Yeah, they buried her in the dress that they had bought her for that, and it's just left all these questions, all these unanswered questions that have followed me through the years, even now into my pastoralship. Being in the church, pastoring, dealing with people. I always wonder, like, what could have happened and what could have been, and is there any hope beyond whatever it is that people feel when they're going through these issues, contemplating suicide, even attempting suicide? And so that's why I think it's very important that I have y'all here this evening, because I want to know, and I think people that view this would want to know, what was going through your mind? What were you feeling? What were you thinking that led to not just contemplating suicide, not just having little cuts on your hand, but actually attempting to actually take your life and by, if not by the grace of God, actually be successful and wouldn't even be here today. And so I want to pose that question to you, Erica, first. You've attempted suicide more than once, right?
Yes.
And so I want you to detail for me, in the best way you can, what led you to the contemplation, what led to the entertainment of the suicide, to the attempt each time, and then see where it goes from there.
So I believe I entertained the thought of committing suicide since I was younger. I, of course, like many, as our viewers have seen, have been brought up without fathers in the home. I had a stepdad, but, it's not the same, definitely. And I had a time in my life where I felt like my sisters, I have two older sisters, they're closer to age and they're much older, and they were pretty popular, and I went through like a stage when I was younger where I was bullied, believe it or not. So I kind of felt like I wasn't good enough. My dad left me being picked on at school. I was very sensitive. I remember being very sensitive at one point. I still am, but I think as I grew up, it turned into more of aggression and anger, and then just feeling justified kind of for my bad behavior or my negligence in every area of my life. But when I was younger, the first time I had tried to commit suicide, it was because I was dating someone. I was only 13 years old, and he was older than me. And my mother found out about him, and I was ashamed, of course, because it's like you don't want to be exposed. Nothing that you know that you're doing is wrong. Rather, you choose to act out in response, or you choose to kind of like, get it right. I didn't get it right. I was more so ashamed. And I will say confidently now I dealt with self-pity a lot growing up, like feeling sorry for myself big time. So when my mom had found out, she had told me she was going to file statutory rape. So I had to kind of warn him, and he ended up going back to California where he was from. And while he did that, my mother, it felt like she hated me, but it's crazy because she shared this with me now, probably like a year ago, but she went through the same thing when she was younger. And she never told me that at the time. I can't help but think, like, had you shared that with me, maybe I wouldn't have thought, like, in this rebellious state of mind as a kid, like, you just are trying to control my life, or you're trying to ruin my life, because that was my thought process when I was younger, just in my immaturity. But I tried to commit suicide when she found out. Pretty much I took a whole bag of pills, over 80 pills, and I just remember I knew that God had existed. I knew God existed. I laid in bed and I looked up, and I don't know where I heard, but I heard, when you commit suicide, you go to hell. When I was younger, I heard that, So I laid in bed, and I just remember crying, saying, God, I'm sorry. And so when I did that, it wasn't long after, but I felt like my whole chest being pumped. And I ran to the restroom, and I started throwing up uncontrollably. My mother was asleep. She was actually, her and my stepdad, they were scheduled to get married the next day and going to Vegas or in celebration. So they had no idea, but I spent the whole night over the toilet throwing my brains out, like really bad. And she woke up, and I was still over the toilet, but she didn't see me. And I kind of felt like, naturally, again, self-pity, like you can't even succeed at killing yourself. You're over here throwing up, and it didn't work. So you just got to deal with it. So she dropped me off at my sister's, and no one knew what had happened that night. But of course, I was still determined to continue to try and do that. I entertained the thought. I put it in the back of my mind, but always saw that as an option. Later on, going through marital issues, I just kind of wanted to succeed somewhere in life, and feel like I did something right for a change, just because I've had, very just bad decision making and stuff like that. Well, my best friend, BNA, she was my best friend, sweet girl, beautiful, if I can just say, like, her social status was up there, thousands of likes on her Instagram, her Facebook, even did modeling pictures, was I could see where Mr. Casey would ask, like, was that girl popular? I think it's relevant just because it's like no matter what the outside looks like, she was very popular. She was very desired, if you will, by everyone. You were to think like, man, what problems does she have? She's talented. She could do this. She could do that. She's beautiful. Every guy must want her. They're going to treat her good.
If you need to fix your headphones, just go like this.
Yeah.
Because they're cute. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so she was almost 9 months pregnant with her second kid, and I got a call from someone that I hadn't spoke to in years through Facebook. And they told me, like, please, I don't know what happened, girl, but I just heard VNA, like, killed herself. It's all over Facebook. And I'm like, we were helping Brother Noel move out of the house and stuff. And I was like, what? Like, are you serious? My husband had just got out of prison at that time. And I didn't really believe it because this is VNA, you know, beautiful as I've stated. And she was in, I didn't think she would do that. I think that in our minds, like, we kind of entertain the thought, like, oh, you're a punk if you can't really go through with suicide. You know what I mean? Only punks, you can't really go through with it. And that's, you know, convoluted mentality, but or you're selfish, or, you know, all these different things. People just kind of try to put a label on it. And it turns out when I pulled up at her house, all her family was there, and she was almost 9 months pregnant, and she hung herself because of a relationship that she was in. He took her son that was already born and told her, like, from what I heard, from what I've gathered, told her, I'm taking Levi and whatever. And she found out he was cheating on her and stuff. And she was like, no, if you do, I'm going to kill myself. But she was 9 months pregnant. Yeah, she ended up killing herself. All her family was there when I got there. And it was a very sad thing, but all her family was there getting drunk and just kind of sad, sobbing. I called my pastor, Luis, and asked him, you know, if he could come and comfort them, you know, talk to them, maybe offer hope. And then sure enough, when I'm walking out of the house telling them bye, I see friends that I went to high school with, and they're like, hey, what's good? You know, let's go to the park. We're going to be at the park. We're going to be taking shots and, you know what I mean, smoking and doing this, and that. Like, you should come through. You know, we're going to do it to, you know, kind of honor her life. And I was just like, no. What do you mean? Why would I want to do that? And, you know, like, she's gone, you know? And so shortly after that, I ended up going through it with my husband, and I revisited that thought because I remember hearing my husband say, like, she's got, and he used other words, like, but he said, like, she had guts to go through and do it. So I'm like, oh, see, like, like, is that how you feel about it? And so when I found out of, you know, infidelity that was going on and stuff, I attempted to do it myself. I ended up looking into, you know, you entertain thoughts, then you look into ways. And like y'all mentioned, there's so many different ways to off yourself. And I looked up the way that Robin Williams, the actor, had, you know, kind of hung himself. So, and I knew that's how VNA did it as well. So I just kind of, the thought stuck with me, and I did it one night when my husband had took off. And at that precise moment when I had thought, like, your mom, like, what is she gonna do? She's gonna go nuts. You've put her through so much already, because I was a runaway child since I was 13. And sure enough, my mother ends up calling on my phone, and I could feel my whole jaw locking up, like everything. I never want to feel that feeling again, but I felt my jaw locking up. My mouth was wrinkly, like it felt like lifeless already. And when she called, I just like took myself off, and I just broke down crying. And after that, I ended up unfortunately leaving the church, committing apostasy, turning my back on God, because the easiest thing is to blame someone that you can't see, you know, instead of like realizing the people that hurt you in this world, they're consumed by sin or whatever. And again, self-pity. I will say self-pity was definitely my demon that I've dealt with my whole life. It's like, it's a sinkhole, and it's a decision. It's definitely a decision. So for me, I would say that that's my red flag. Anytime I feel sad, feel sorry for myself, it's like, get it together, you know, because you know a little darkness, how deep that darkness will go with you. So that was kind of a sum up of my experience.
Praise God that your mom called you.
Yeah, for real.
Did you answer the phone?
No, but when she called, it was confirmation that just caused me to like, what are you doing? Like,
Man, praise God.
you know, and yeah.
And so, I mean, you know, beyond the attempt, you know, in that moment, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were, I think, kind of.
The reason why I'm asking is because,
Yeah.
you know, that's the question that we all have on the other side. You know, those that are having to bury people, you know, and deal with the after effects of the suicide is what were your thoughts? You know, what were you trying to prove? What were you trying to accomplish by that?
My thoughts, one, I felt like a failure. So I felt like you've been trying this. You're not real to yourself. You're a fake. Like, and I believe I listened to a lot of voices that weren't my own. You know, now that I am who I am, I know that it was all influenced. But also, you know, my, how do you say, insecurities, you know what I mean, of knowing where I lacked and stuff, that it kind of played me. You know, it kind of played on my mind. And but the main thing was definitely, I want my husband to know, like, this is where you took me. This is where you drove me.
So I've heard this term before, and I don't know if anybody wants to interject in there. I've heard this term, and I've actually done a little bit of research on it, suicidal hate, where you hate someone so much, you want them to feel your pain, so you're willing to kill yourself to make them feel the pain, you know?
That makes a lot of sense. If that's probably in better words than I chose, because it's kind of like, you see the selfishness of someone else. So my husband was in prison for 6 years, and I sacrificed and I did everything and I served God, but I didn't realize at the time that someone has to make a choice to do what's right. Instead, I kind of like blamed God for it and was like, you see these amazing miracles happening in marriages. These men get it together, and am I just not enough? You know? So you kind of like look at yourself, and it's like, it's your fault. It's your fault. So I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to live with that for the rest of his life, that like, you felt me.
Do you feel that was a VNA's perspective too, or was it her more out of desperation? Hopelessness?
I think it was, I really think that it was more so probably a hopelessness, because she was, like I said, she was very popular. And
she had everything that you would think in the world would make you happy, yet she was still lost.
Yeah, where she just kind of was like, he doesn't want me, I don't want. I remember telling my husband when we would get in altercations, fighting physically and stuff, I'd be like, I'd rather die by the hands of the guy that I loved than, like, stupidly. I get emotional about it if I have to say this. It's only because it's like, I'm so thankful to be alive.
Yeah.
I could be in hell right now.
Yeah,
You know?
Praise God.
So.
Good. Well, that's a powerful testimony. Great insight. I want to switch it over to Jennifer, and so I want you to, you know, I mean, I know a little bit of your story, but I want to hear. And I think it's beneficial for everyone who views this and hears this to, hear your perspective of your mental state, your emotional state, one that produced the idea, the entertainment, and then the attempt. Where were you at? Where were you at that time? And kind of detail that for us up to the attempt and what the attempt was.
Well,
and take your time.
So it started back in like 2007 when I lost my grandfather. And I mean, I had always suffered from like rejection in school, but every weekend my grandfather would come over, and that brought joy to me. And so when I lost him, my life just completely spiraled out of control. And I still lived at home with my parents, but I remember very clearly after the funeral, because I don't remember the funeral, but I remember coming home and knowing that I was never going to see him again. And I remember doing everything possible to move out of the house because I didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't want my parents to have to see me go through that. So I don't even know how it happened, but I was able to move out of the house. And I moved out, and shortly after, I struggled with it a lot, but I was able to keep a cool. And at the time, I had been in a relationship that had been going on for like, I don't know, I think it'd been like 4 years or something. And so me stupidly thinking, okay, well, if I get married, I will feel happy again. Thing being that this guy didn't want to commit. And so I started thinking to myself, well, what's wrong with me? You know, why? I did everything that I needed to do. You know, I was a good girlfriend, and you know, why isn't he wanting to commit? And so I was really looking forward to that because I thought that's what was going to bring me joy because I missed my grandfather so much. So, hey, let's move on to the next thing. Well, that never happened. So I remember one time I was in my apartment and I was just tired. I was just sick of it. I had friends, and I would see how all my friends would get cheated on or how they cheat on their boyfriends. And I'm like, is this really all that life is? Like, you know, I'd work, and I'd have to go to work early. I'd come home late because I had to stay late in order to be able to pay my rent. And for what? Just to be miserable. So I don't remember clearly how I got to that place that day. I do remember thinking, okay, let me take some pills. And because I've heard of people commit suicide, they take pills, they go to sleep, they never wake up. And so I remember having the pills, and I remember thinking, no, that's going to take too long. Like, I want out now. And so, like you were saying, at the time, I felt like it was just hopelessness. I knew about God, but I had never received God. So it was just kind of like in the back of my mind. I had a gun, and I was like, you know what? This is it. I'll take the gun, I'll shoot myself, and it'll be done and over with. And so I did. I took the gun, and I remember sitting there, looking at the pills one last time, thinking, okay, is this the best way to do this? And I said, yeah. I took it up to my head, and I pushed the trigger, and nothing happened. And I remember at that moment just dropping it and freaking out. And then all that I could hear in the back of my mind, my mom used to always tell me when I was growing up, remember that everything has a way out except death. And I kept hearing that in my mind. And I was so nervous. I know you said that I called you. I don't remember that. I don't remember how that day ended. All I remember is waking up the next day and thinking, I wouldn't be here right now. And thinking, I remember at that moment, I did think, there's got to be a purpose to my life. What does God want from me? Yet time passed, and even though I had that thought, still, I went on with my life, was in another relationship, same thing. betrayed. And so here comes that thought again. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I knew better this time. I knew better. I knew that wasn't the way out, yet I still wanted out. So now my struggle was, how do I leave this world without having to shoot myself or take pills or, something. So then I struggled for that for a while. And then I think, because I struggled with it for like the longest time. I want to say that I finally came to grips, not even that long ago, maybe a few years ago, when I finally got rid of those thoughts, because I want to say I was already married, and my marriage was also, it wasn't working out. So here I am again thinking, how do I get out of this? And I remember having dreams, and always in these dreams, I see my grandfather. And I remember in my dream looking at my grandfather and telling him, like, take me with you. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I wanted to feel his love, because I hadn't felt that for so long. And in one of my dreams, I remember telling him, just take me with you. And I could just see him staring at me. And then I think that's when it became, like you said, selfishness, because at the time I already had my boys. And I remember my grandfather looking at me in the dream, and he didn't say anything, but I knew what he was telling me with his eye contact. And he was telling me, you have kids. And I remember saying, can I bring them with me? I think I was being selfish. I mean, my kids it wasn't their fault. And so I'm there in my dream telling my grandfather, take me, take my kids. It'll be all better once I'm with you. And I can see him looking at me, disappointed in me, like, how could you? And when I woke up from my dream, I realized that, I needed to stop, quit feeling sorry for yourself. You can do something about it. And mind you, God's always been there for me, yet I always put my faith, my into something other than God, which that's all I needed, because like it says, life is but a vapor. We need to be here and focus on God, not on, am I going to be happy? Am I this? Am I that? And so after that, I've never had dreams of my grandfather again. And I want to say, not too long ago, I went through something again major. And surprisingly, that was not first on my mind, which I felt so proud of myself, because now I knew that that's not the way out. Now I knew, what, God, no matter what, I'm going to serve you, and you are all that I need in the end. There was another thing that I wanted to add to that, and I totally lost it. So I mean, it's just crazy how you said that, and then I totally put it together where it went from hopelessness to selfishness. I thought that was interesting. But yes, so now my focus is, what do I need to do? I try to keep myself busy. I try to do more things in church now, because if I stay home, it tries to creep up on you, and at the time, I think that if I would have known more about God, I would have been able to identify that that's the devil trying to speak into my life, trying to make me end it. I didn't see it that way. I thought it was just me, and it was a good idea. Now I see it clearly, and I'm like, that was the devil. And like my mom says, I don't know how to say it in English, but she says, el diablo sabe de qué pata cojeas, or something like that. And it's true, because all these years, that happened back in 2007. We are now in, 2021. I want to say the last time I had a thought like that was probably, 5 years ago or so, about 5 years ago. He knew where he could get me, and he tried and tried and tried.
As I'm listening, do you mind if I fill in the blanks a little bit?
Go ahead.
So I guess if I got the timeline correct, was I got a phone call from Jennifer's my sister, and so my blood sister, not just my Christian sister, So I got a phone call from her back when she said it was in the middle of the day, I think, or no, it was like a late early evening. It was early evening, and she called me on the phone. I was like, "What's up?" And she was like, "Hey, you need to come to our apartment right now." And I was like, "What's going on?" She was like, "You need to get over here now." And I was like, "Okay." So I remember I took off from where I was at, went to her apartment. And when I went to her apartment, she opened the door, knocked on the door. She opened the door. She handed me a box. She said, "Take this." And I was like, "What is this?" She was like, "Take this away from me." She was like, "I can't have that with me." And then she just shut the door. And I was like, "What?" So I grabbed the box that she gave me. I went into my truck and I opened it up, and it was a gun. It was a semi-automatic. It was a Burst of Thunder 380 ACP. She had disassembled it. It was all disassembled in little pieces. And I was like, what the? Like, I was like, what happened? So I called her back, and I was like, what happened? I was I didn't want to say, like, did you try to kill yourself? I was like, what happened? She was just looking at me kind of like with this weird glazed look in her eye. And I remember I got off my truck. I went back to her apartment, and I tried to talk to her, just kind of like trying to talk some sense into her about Jesus and stuff. And she was kind of like just not all there. You could tell, and she was mentioning this. She made this comment about, she hasn't, thought about it for a while and stuff. For the longest time, I remember I would always see my sister. She always had this glazed look over her. And I was telling her recently, I was like, you don't have that glazed look no more. Like, she always had like this glazed, like kind of like not all there look. And I would always think, I was like, man, this girl's still not all there, like from back then, you know what I mean? And she doesn't have that no more. But I think you answered some questions that a lot of people have, when they hear about murder suicides. It's the reasoning behind the murder suicide is you said you want to end it all, you want to leave, and you feel grandpa saying, like, dude, you have kids, and you're like, I'll take them with me, like you're helping your kids. And a lot of times people wonder, like, dude, how could she killed and murdered her kids? A lot of times it's out of, as convoluted as it might sound, and people might not even accept this, it's out of a concern for them. Like, you don't want to leave them behind to suffer, so I'm going to take them with me. You know what I mean? It translates horribly in real world, but in our mind that's affected, that is convoluted, it makes sense because you're suffering. You're not going to leave them behind to suffer, so I'm going to do them a favor and I'm going to take them with me. You know what I'm saying?
And then, that was exactly my thought. I remember talking to Mom about it, and I remember telling her how was I going to leave them if I was suffering so much? What was I going to leave them to, like, might as well take them with me and we'd all be together.
Well, and that helps answer a lot of the questions that I know here recently, a few years ago, there was that one murder-suicide in that very ritzy area of town here in San Antonio where it was a mom that killed herself, and then her two daughters were killed them. She killed them, and everybody's like, why, how could you, and it's like, dude, like, it makes sense. Yes, it's convoluted. It translates very horribly into real world, perspective, but it answers the question. It's out of a concern, for those who are being left behind, because we understand the devastation that it produces. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
If I may say, I think it's such a twisted influence that it's like, for me, I believe that we adopt certain mentalities that really aren't ours. You know what I mean? And it's all influenced, through the devil and stuff like that. Aside from our own flaws, I do believe that I entertained a lot of thoughts that were not my own. Mm-hmm. And it was hard for me to differentiate whether it was my thought or, the devil's. And that's something that I had struggled with for a long time. And, well, God, how do I know it's your voice and it's not my own? Yeah. So I believe it was very twisted.
Mm-hmm. It's a demonic thing, but yeah.
Yeah, because it's weird that you say the glaze. I remember my sister, when I was a new convert, my sister would be like, are you there? Like,
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. But she would see that same glaze over my eyes. That was just weird. I thought I'd mention that because you said that. I've never heard that before.
How do you feel, Jennifer, right now, speaking about it and getting through the story? Or
I feel a bit better. I've never talked about it with anybody. I didn't even know up until a few days that you knew about it. I don't remember any of that. I feel like liberated in a way.
Praise God.
But I do know that I never want to be in that spot ever again.
Yeah.
And it's just an ugly spot to be in. And I mean, now that I look back at it, thinking, how I could have, taken out my kids, like I feel so ashamed and so like, how could I even have thought that? Not even giving them a chance.
yeah.
So I praise God that, I finally get it. And now I'm working towards, one day I will see my grandfather, and that's what I want. And I want my kids to be able to meet him because he was such a great man. Mm-hmm. And thinking back and thinking, well, if I would have done it, I would have really never have seen him. And that just would have been.
Nor would they ever nor will your kids ever had a chance of even
Exactly.
coming to find out.
And so I think a lot that motivates me as well too, that it's like, you got to do the right thing. And that's why you want to talk to people about it, because I mean, I know I'm probably not the only one who's felt that way, and if I would have known, the thing too, I was real quiet about it. I've never been one to share stuff that I'm going through. The whole suicide thing, I've always been a person to be like, when somebody talks about suicide, they ain't gonna do it. They ain't gonna do it. It's just talk. When you want to commit suicide, you just do it. You don't talk about it. And so that was me. Yeah. I was like, I never talked about it with anybody, because it's like, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. So, and I think that if I had, the pants to, put that gun to my head, the more that I can do, if I have, God with me, because if I was able to do that,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the level of courage. I mean, within the proper parameters of what we're speaking about, those people that are always crying wolf, I'm going to kill myself, but yet it's just the attention. And I've said this many times for years. I've always preached this and said this. Real people who are really suicidal, one day you just find them dead. Yes. Plain and simple. They never talk about it. They never said anything. You would have never known. You would have thought they were the happiest person in the world. One day they're dead. Or we have stories like y'all's where it's like they would have been dead had it not been for God's grace. And praise God for God's grace, because it only proves, one, how powerful God is. But two, how much God's purposes mean to him, to God. How much his purposes mean to him, that he's willing to cover you from your own self and protect you from your own self, from your own, from you taking your own life, because his purposes for your life matter so much to him. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like you were saying, like there has to be a meaning to my life. There has to be a purpose in my life. Yet there was, to the degree that God was willing to cover you from that bullet. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So that his purposes are fulfilled because they were so important to him.
For so many years.
Correct.
Because it's been a process, and I feel like I finally got it, and I'm like, man, like if I would have gotten this years ago, things would have been so much different. I could have helped so much people.
Correct.
Because I've dealt with people in my path, and yet I couldn't help them because look what I was trying to do.
Correct. And I think part of it is, I think one large part of it is that revelation. Dude, like I could help someone. Like what we've been through, what you've been through, what Erica's been through is like, this is some serious, other than God, you wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. This is God. Like there is something greater, something more for us. If God was willing to go to those great measures to protect our lives, what I'm saying? Because aside from God, we wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And so I think that kind of speaks to the sovereignty of God. And I think it kind of is going to come back full circle ultimately when we're done with this, is that I guess people have to realize that the hope is Jesus, man.
Right, yeah.
It all comes back to the hope being Jesus Christ. And so hearing these stories, Richie, how does that, how does your life and your circumstance fit into this dynamic of what you've heard from them?
It's almost like they're telling my story. when we were pastoring a church, I remember Jeremiah, he was a lot younger back then. And he asked me, don't you get tired of sharing your testimony? I said, I do, Jeremiah. I said, but the thing is, you don't understand the things that God has helped me through. And so to go from, trying to commit suicide 3 different times to where God has brought me now, to where I travel all over the place, able to preach to, when they have all the youth there, to be able to share my testimony with the youth in different churches. They do youth rallies and to share my testimony about being involved with the martial arts, and then the struggles of contemplating suicide. And it's interesting how some of them will hear the words, and it's like, wow, it's like you're telling my story. So I'm just thankful that God counted me worthy in the midst of all my craziness and ways of thinking, that he said, it's almost like with Paul, I got to show Paul what things, he has to go through, because I'm going to use his life. I didn't see it at the time, but I do remember the first time when I was trying to overdose on pills. I was probably about a freshman in high school at the time. And by that time, I've already discovered, obviously my parents were my biological grandparents that had adopted me. What would hurt a lot to me was not really getting any affection. I'm proud of you or anything like that. That played a big role in my life. They provided for me, but as far as like the emotional support, things like that, it really wasn't there. And then to find out that my biological mother had my brother, and so the gentleman that she was with at the time wanted to marry her, right? We will put you in a house and all these different things. The only issue was, she says, Richard comes with me, and then he says, no, if Richard's coming, then we're not getting married. So once I got wind of that story, so it just made things even worse. It's like, wow, what did I do that I can't have a normal family like everyone else? And of course, I'm a product of a rape, and I make sure I share that with the teenagers as well. They put themselves in compromising situations where things like that will happen, and then they get mad at God, and ultimately it wasn't God's fault. The second time attempt there, probably about a sophomore or a junior, same thing, playing football, already starting to manipulate girls, starting to get into pharmaceutical field with narcotics and things of that nature, but no fulfillment. You can get high, you can get drunk, all these different things, but you go through the headache, the hangover, and you wake up and it's still the same thing. Eventually I would get into the martial arts. I can remember about a year or 2 after that, it was like, man, is this the best that's out there for me? And as a result of that, I'm already out of school at that time. I'm already out. I'm in my 3rd floor apartment. And so forget the pills. The pills was too much work, swallowing the pills, going to the hospital, get your stomach pumped, and all these different issues. So the third final time I did put a gun to my head, sitting in my living room in my apartment, and it misfired. And so in the midst of that, I'm now upset. I'm cussing.
So you pulled the trigger?
I pulled the trigger, and it just clicked. And so that's where I start cussing. It's like, I can't believe I can't even do this right. And so I'm tired. Just turned 18. I had just turned 18. I'm already tired of life. And I like to reiterate what I mean tired of life at 18. Just turned 18. As what the world says, if you drink, if you have money, if you have girls, you have all these things, that's going to make you happy. But when you have all that, you realize you're still not happy. There's still something missing. So I walk through my living room, go out on the balcony, and I'm still using some profanity or cuss words there, and aiming the gun away from the apartment as I'm cussing. I pull the trigger, same gun, right? Same magazine, everything there. But this time it did discharge. And it's a boom right next to my ear. It was really loud. And I can remember right there and then is when I started, God, there has to be more to life. And so I understood there was a God, but having grown up in a Catholic church, as I've mentioned before, you see, people being hypocrites. They're in mass Sunday morning, by 2, 3 o'clock, Sunday afternoon, everybody's getting drunk, watching the games. So I was already tired of all that. But was it painful? Yes. Especially once I started having kids, Rachel and I started having children, I couldn't imagine what my grandparents would have gone through if I had succeeded They only know of one, which was the overdose on the pills. They don't really know about the gun issue and the other one, the second one. They don't know about that. But after the first attempt, I did go to a youth behavioral facility there for, having mental issues and things like that. But again, I'm glad I went through what I went through, because all those programs or anything was not even scratching the surface to the spiritual problem that I had, which was sin. And at the time, I wasn't aware of that. But as like God used Paul, and I'm not saying I'm an apostle or anything like that, but the pain and the suffering that God allowed me to go through the whole time He was there, not realizing all I had to do was just cry out to Him.
Yeah. And one of the things that I was going to ask you was, because she said the same, Jennifer said the same thing, Erica said the same thing, you said the same exact thing, and I remember saying the same exact thing before I got saved. Like, is there more to life than this? Where does that come from, in your opinion? Is there more to life than this? Because everyone asks that. From what place does that come from?
In my personal opinion, it's almost like, especially with social media now and everything, the infomercials and everything, if you want to be successful, you got to have the bling, you got to have the money, you got to have all these different things. But then it sounds good if you come from there's no money in your family, everybody's broke, they have to work 2 jobs, whatever. It sounds good. But then when you give yourself to that, regardless of what's necessary, I'll do whatever it takes. But then when you get there, you may not be a millionaire, but you're well off. I mean, you have money, you have drugs, you have girlfriends, status at clubs and things of that nature. So you're there where everyone else was promising you, hey, if you can reach this status, you're going to be happy. You're not going to have any issues and things. But it's almost like you're there, and it's like for me, it was a big disappointment. And it's like, wow, I did what the world was saying. This is what's going to make you happy, and it didn't. It just made things worse.
So what were the raw emotions at you're on the couch? What was the raw emotions that you're feeling that drove the attempt?
I think in the very beginning was the fact that my mother didn't want to keep me. That was at I guess the seed that was planted there. She didn't want to raise me. She gave me over to my grandparents, and I'm thankful she did that. But out of that, at that point, everything I had already been through and still no success, or what I considered success. And again, not realizing that I had a spiritual problem, trying to fix it with a physical solution. But, I'm 48 now, and looking back, there were a few times, and I think I mentioned it in the podcast, that my grandfather that adopted me and gave me his last name, he was my biological mother's stepfather. So there's no blood, ties there. But I can remember as a young kid trying to hug him or try to, show him some affection, that he would push me away. Mm-hmm. But now having my own kids and being saved and been ministering for a number of years, I came to the conclusion that he probably didn't even know how to be a father. He probably went through the same thing and kept a lot of things to himself. So the best advice I would give, anybody, especially parents, if you have kids, if you're fighting through your own issues, don't keep it to yourself. You need to find someone to speak to. That's why I so appreciate all of our churches in the fellowship. We can talk to our pastor, and it stays in the office. It doesn't go on social media, things like that. And we're able to break those generational curses. That's one of the blessings for me that I get to see the longer I'm in ministry, that you're able to meet people at their complete worst. They've tried suicide, broken marriages, broken finances, all these different things. And I just go and preach. And, this is what God has done in my life. You can go to richardvalerio.com and you can read some of the testimonies. I'm not anybody special. I went through all the issues that just about everyone goes through. But the only difference for Rachel and I was our commitment to be committed to the things of God, regardless of the cost.
Yeah. Well, and I think, every testimony here this evening is powerful. But there's another aspect of it that we need that we talk about all the time in suicides, is the people that are left behind.
Yes.
And, Daniel, our producer, Daniel, the reason why he's on the, on the table discussion is because he's experienced suicide from that perspective, as having family members commit suicide and having to live beyond dealing with the impact of that. And so what I would like for Daniel to do is if you can just, help us, but help people who are watching this who have dealt with suicide, family members that are left behind, how before you talk about God and Jesus and hope, what are some things that went through your mind, the way you process these things to keep you moving forward?
Yeah, so the way I have experience with this is two very close family members of mine. My little brother committed suicide a couple years ago at the age of 17. And my cousin, who was a brother from another mother, we grew up together. He committed suicide last year. So recently, within 2 years. First off, with my little brother, I got to give a little bit of history on our situation. So my brother was 17 when he killed himself. So he was pretty young. So rewind, when he was, so he lived with us. He lived with my family, me and Liz. I had custody of him for a few years, for about 5 years or so. He came to live with us when he was around 10. So the history of that is when he was about 4, just about to turn 4, my mom was murdered by her boyfriend. And so his dad at that time was never really around. So once my mom died, he kind of bounced around with my sister and with his grandma and stuff. And so I always wanted, ever since that happened, my goal was to be there for him as a father figure, especially since his father was never really around. And so, when we were finally able to get into position to get him for custody, he was around 10. It was a long process. I mean, there's a whole backstory to it. He's Native American. His dad is full Native American. And in New Mexico, he lived on the reservation, or his whole family's from the reservation. And so getting custody was a miracle in itself. It's unheard of for non-natives to get custody. But anyways, so that was a big old, we finally got custody. It was a miracle. God moved, miraculously in that whole situation. We finally got custody of him when he was around 10. He was a tough kid to raise. Obviously he knew how my mom was murdered, and that really played a big part in a lot of his attitude and the problems that he had. Also, being that his father didn't really have anything to do with him, he always longed for that relationship with his family, with his dad. So as he was living with us, we would go to church. This was in New Mexico, so we were in a fellowship church in Rio Rancho, and so he was exposed. I believe that he was saved at portions throughout. Obviously, he would rebel and do his own thing and stuff, but he was around the Christian life that me and my wife set forth in our household. And I would talk to him and try to just really explain to him, like, hey man, you need to put all this stuff aside. You need to give your life to God fully, and God can do great things in your life. And try to be a real father mentor to him, and teach him what it would be like to be a real man of God. And so, we had some good times, some bad times. He did struggle a lot, obviously. He would go visit the family, which was about 3 hours north of where we were. And, that side of the family is a lot of freedom, a lot of no responsibility, basically. So he kind of did what he wanted to. So that kind of was always tugging at him, you know, of just, hey, I can do what I want over here under my brother. There's lots of rules, and I got to live a certain way and whatnot. And so, anyways, fast forward to he was about 15, 16 almost. He decided, he made that decision. He wanted to go back to the res. And, you know, some stuff had transpired before that, him getting in trouble, and he stole our car, and I got called in the middle of the night from the cops and stuff. And, so I just straight put it to him, like, what do you want in life? And, you know, are you serious about this, or, you know, you need to make a decision? So he made that decision to go back. So when he went back, you know, I told him everything that was going to happen. I told him, you know, your life is going to go downhill. You're going to start making bad choices. You're going to, you know, kind of just showing him, you know, the life out there, because my whole family's out there. I know what it is people do out there. I know the life that, you know, he was going to go towards, and kind of gave him those warnings, but, you know, told him that, hey, you know, we're here for you. We'll still be here for you if anything you need. So within that time, you know, we still talked with him, and, you know, we'd hang out with him. He'd come back and visit us. But he was putting up a facade through these whole couple years. I'd ask him how school's going, and, you know, he would say, oh, things are going good. Obviously, I didn't believe him because he had trouble with us. But, you know, I heard stories from my side of the family that would tell me stuff about what's going on with him, and, you know, he would just lie to me and kind of make everything look like everything was good and he was happy and everything's fine with his family and whatnot. And so anyways, the night that this happened was in April, and it's one of those situations, you know, that, you know, I'll never forget, obviously. I remember it vividly. It was a Saturday, and, you know, we were getting ready for a door scene, and I get a call in the afternoon, and I answer, and he's crying, and he's just telling me, you know, that he's sorry for everything that he's done. He's sorry for just all that he put us through, and that he saw that everything I told him, that it was correct, it was right, that I was right about everything, that he's not happy, he hates his life, that his family that he wanted to have a relationship with, that they're not there for him, that, you know, that part of this that brought this on is that he told me that him and some friends had done some mushrooms, and he said that he was seeing demons, and that he was freaking out because being with us, he kind of knew the spiritual realm and knew that there are demons out there. There is a good and evil. And so he was freaking out that these demons were attacking him, and he was just having a really hard time. And, you know, he was like, I just want to come back. I want to come back with you. Can I come back with you? He asked me to pray for him. He asked me, he wanted to ask for forgiveness. So I prayed with him. I prayed, you know, did the sinner's prayer with him, you know, told him to just keep praying and asking God, and just try to, you know, just try to calm down. So in this whole situation, one of the things that I think, as being somebody that knows somebody who committed suicide, you always kind of kick yourself that I should have done more. I could have done more. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And one of the things that I'm still kind of haunts me, I guess, is just in dealing him with the situation. I never did drugs. I never took mushrooms. So I didn't know what it felt like. I didn't know that experience. To me, I thought he was just having a bad trip. I figured, he would sleep it off. He'd be fine. So I didn't really take it 100% seriously, on his experience of being attacked by demons. I kind of wish I did, obviously, after the fact. So anyways, I was, like I said, he lived about 3 hours away from me, so it wasn't as easy to just, go and check in on him. We had stuff to do that night, so, I just kind of, after he kind of calmed down, I told him, just, let me know how it goes, but just, try to go lay down, try to sleep, try to, wait till this thing wears off or whatever. And then I get another call from him, and over about 45 minutes to an hour, he called me probably about 3 or 4 times, and he's just wigging out again, and he's saying, these demons are attacking him, and he said he's walking to a police station, which was down the house from where he lived, and he's like, should I go there? I don't know if I should go. And again, my naiveness of not knowing what that feels like, I didn't want him to get in trouble or, them kind of, I don't know, whatever would happen. So I was just like, dude, just go back home, just, try to sleep it off or something. And so he went back to his house. Again, I talked to him again. He asked me again that he just wanted to come back home with me, with us. He really wasn't happy there at all. It was all a lie. Come to find out, since he went back, he failed every single class for the last year and a half, 2 years. He wasn't even really going to school much anymore. And, the family and the relationships he thought he was going to have didn't happen. So he had these expectations that just never came to reality, and he realized the life of being a young kid, doing what you want, whenever you want, having total freedom is not the life that he thought it was going to be. He felt lonely. Even though the family was there, he felt alone. And so, again, we go back and forth with some calls, and he asked me, because there's a church in the town that he lived in, a fellowship church, and he asked if I can call one of them to go pray with him about these demons and stuff. And again, one of those things, I tried calling my pastor at the time to get a phone number and get his opinion on this, and things, he wasn't around. I think my pastor tried calling him and he didn't answer. I don't know. Again, it was just like, okay, just sleep it off. Like, after this tomorrow, we'll talk. I told him, when you're in your right mind, if you really feel this way, when you're sober, then we'll talk about what it'll take for you to come back with us. I said, we're open to that, of course, as long as you mean it in your heart. And he said, okay. And so the last that I got a call from him is he called me. He said, hey, were you able to get a hold of the pastor? And I said, no, I wasn't able to get a hold of him. And he hung up mid-sentence. So I was just like, what the heck? And so I tried calling him back. He didn't answer. I texted him. I was like, hey, dude, what the heck? What are you doing? Like, I'm still trying to talk to you. And he didn't answer. He just straight up hung up on me after I said I couldn't get a hold of him. And looking back on it after the fact, I do kind of remember hearing the loss of hope. He was grasping onto the hope of, if the pastor could go pray with him, with these demons. And when I said I couldn't get a hold of him, that he just kind of like gave up. So after that, since I couldn't get a hold of him, I called my cousin, the one that killed himself last year, because we were close. And he was like a brother. I called him to, tried calling him to see if he can go check on Julian, my brother. And I called him. He didn't answer. I called his sister. She wasn't around. She wasn't in the town to go check on him. So maybe about 10, 15 minutes pass. I finally get a hold of my cousin. He answers. Luckily, he's just down the street. I was like, hey, can you go check on Julian? I explained the whole situation. So he's like, yeah, let me go check on him. I'll give you a call back. So, I'm just thinking that he was just mad or just kind of sad and just kind of there in the house. And so I'm back in the kitchen of our house. I get a call from my cousin. And he's crying and he's screaming. And he says, I'm too late. And so he was having a breakdown. He could barely talk. He was just saying that the cops are already there. They're not letting him inside. And that they told him that he killed himself. And I remember when he said that, I just dropped to my knees. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I just talked to him like 20 minutes ago. And my wife was in the kitchen as well. And she saw me drop and just start crying. And that moment was just unreal. It was almost like an out-of-body experience. Like it didn't seem like it was real. So right away, I just grabbed my keys and I just left. And I remember just crying and just praying the whole time in the car. Just praying that he was alive, that he was going to be alive long enough for me to at least get there and pray with him. And obviously, I think deep down inside, I knew he was gone. So in those 3 hours, I just did a lot of praying and a lot of thinking, and again, the guilt of why didn't I do more? Or why didn't I try harder? Or why didn't I just go get him? Started to set in. And, it was tough. I know that the one thing I didn't mention is, I know he was going through a lot of emotions that day because the day before was our mom's birthday. And so obviously I know that brought up a lot of memories and a lot of emotions about my mom being gone. So I know that played a factor into it. So, after that, after getting there, the cops were still there. I waited around until they did their investigations and they brought him out and I saw him. they stopped and we were able to put hands on him. And, I just kept praying and praying nonstop. And, this is one of those situations that was, was one of the hardest things to go through for me in my life, was coming to terms and acceptance of this. Two things. One is my hope. Well, let me backtrack. So my view kind of changed before just growing up. I always just had the mentality, like I think a lot of people do, that committing suicide is the ultimate sin. You commit suicide, you go to hell. Obviously, after the situation, I think that's a very naive way to look at things. One thing, like with my brother Julian, that I take into consideration is demonic influence and what that plays on people's last moments. I heard it in his voice. He was terrified. He was literally saying, I see demons. They're attacking me. After I prayed with him, he said he felt better. And then he'd call me again. Like, they're back there, like they kept trying to like latch onto him. And I think, we overlooked that part of suicide that, I honestly believe he wasn't in his right mind. One, because of the drugs and the type of drugs he was doing, that opens up a spiritual realm. And the other is that, people are attacked. People are, being pushed by the devil that do this. Hey, they don't love you. You know what I mean? Like I said, when he just hung up on me, and you can hear that hope leave him, it's like I can just imagine the devil is just telling him, they don't love you. See, nobody cares about you. And just do it. And, he shot himself. And so with that, it's a split second. You know what I mean? So that action is not always selfish. It's not always, poor me. I don't care about anybody else. I'm going to take my life. A lot of it is people who are hurting, people who are lost, people who are being lied to by the devil, and, aren't always in the right mind. So looking back at all the events, that kind of, I pray even to this day, just that that God had grace in those last moments, that he did cry out. I did pray with him for salvation, that in those last moments, that maybe he cried out to God, that, him not being in his right mind and the demonic influence, that he made it to heaven. And, I just kind of try to hold hope with that. So, that was a little easier than my cousin. My cousin, again, he killed himself last year, this month in September. And, he was going through a lot of stuff too. He was battling a lot of stuff. I think one of the things he was battling with was the situation with Julian, and that he was there and he got there too late. And anybody who knows my cousin knows that he was very selfless. He would do anything to help anybody. He would give a stranger the shirt off his back. Like, he would do whatever he had to help anybody. And so I know, being that he didn't answer the phone the first time I called him, that he didn't get there sooner, I know that played a big part. I mean, that's a lot to take on. That's a lot to handle. You know what I mean? And then he was dealing with a lot of other stuff. And that one's a little harder to process and to get over. As we were really close. Again, he was like my brother. We grew up together. But like I just can't believe that he did that. What he did. He had 2 little kids. He had a daughter and a son that he left behind, and I still kind of just get angry when I think about, that he took his life. We were always, the ones to hold each other accountable. We always kept telling each other, like, dude, I'll knock you out if you do this or do that. You know what I mean? Like, if you were to do this in a relationship or whatnot. And I just keep thinking, like, man, if you were here right now, I would sock you. You know what I mean? Just like we used to when we were growing up.
Yeah.
And it's like, why did you do this? And again, I just got to keep remembering, like, I don't know, everything he was going through. I know a lot of the stuff he was going through and a lot of the problems he had, but he took everything really to the heart. And again, it's like, man, I just wish I could have talked to him before, you know what I mean? Like, why didn't you call me? So that one's a lot harder to deal with. He did, again, I try to hold some hope. His situation is a little different, but he did have some moments where he did pray for salvation. He had come to church with me, him and his family, a couple times, and he had hit the altar, and he was emotional, and I would talk to him about Christ and send him verses and try to give him words of encouragement and try to help him out, just talking to him and encouraging him and all that he had going on. So again, I was just trying to hold out hope that in those last moments, I hope he cried out or something.
So I think what this does is it gives us a full perspective of every aspect of the suicide dynamic, because here we can sympathize and empathize at the same time. One, because here Jennifer can see the effect that suicide has had on a brother, right? And Richie can see the effect that suicide could have had on a family member. Erica could see, and so it's given us, and as and I mean, as Daniel was speaking, I'm thinking to myself, thank God Jennifer didn't succeed. You know what I mean? Because I'd be Daniel. You know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure people in Richie's family would feel the same. Erica's family, she has sisters, and it gives us a full circle perspective of how this works. Full circle, that it's. We preach about this all the time, and I don't think it's never as real and as upfront and in your face as it is now, that everything we do, it doesn't just affect us. In whatever perspective you want to put it, in whatever attitude, emotion, mental state, whatever we do, beyond suicide, everything, it affects everyone around us. And you see the after effects of hope. You see the after effects of pain, right? People that have to live with this and find a way to reason beyond the event, to live life to the fullest, and a good, decent life, you know what I mean? And all while carrying this burden, you know what I'm saying? And it gives us that fuller understanding of why hope becomes the hope that we have to offer, the hope that there is for lost souls, for lost people, why that becomes the forefront of what we're going to, what we're going to do as people moving forward. You know what I mean? Is to offer that hope. Mm-hmm. Is to say, like, man, like, Daniel said it, like, what could have I done differently? Could have I done more? You know what I mean? And aside from God mending and healing his heart, he's going to live with that for the rest of his life. But one thing that he can do, we can do, is that we can say, you know what, well, I'm going to do everything I can from now on for whoever else or whatever else in any situation, because God forbid we find ourselves there again. You know what I'm saying? And what if that extra effort could actually save that person? And what if those extra, whatever conversations, attempts, willingness, whatever it is, actually bring a different outcome to those dynamics. In regards to suicide, well, the after effect of what people have to deal with, dealing with suicide. What I want to do is before we go into what I want to do is I want to take some time now to focus on each and every one of us talking about the hope. But before I go into the hope, I want to just give you an opportunity, starting with Casey, to add something before we go into the hope part.
Well, throughout this whole section of our podcast, I've just been thinking about Ephesians 6:12, for we do not battle against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and rulers of the darkness. I don't know if it's worded like that, but I've been attacked like that. I was standing in a 9-story window, and I had a ladder in my hand, and the only thing that was in front of that window, the glass wasn't even there yet. It was a 2x4, and all I had to do was just give it a good kick. And I was in pretty good shape. I was in better shape then. All I had to do was just give it a really good kick, and that 2x4 would have went. And I was going to take the ladder with me, so it looked like an accident. And while I was standing at that window, I got a phone call from this girl that I used to mess with. And she's going to see this. Hey, thank you for saving my life that day. Because I would have never walked away from that window if I would have never got that phone call. I would have jumped out of it. And I wasn't saved then, but I got saved shortly after that. And that opened my eyes. And hearing each and every one of y'all's testimonies here, man, thank you so much for sharing those, because I really feel that somebody's going to see this, and it's going to touch somebody, and it's going to be just powerful. You can save lives with this. Pastor Richie, your ministry is powerful. And man, I love it when you come and preach at the church, because you're actually one of my favorite preachers that come, because it's so powerful, and I always get something from it that I put it in my pocket and I take it. I take it with me, then I use it whenever I get attacked, because I still get attacked. I call Pastor all the time, and he's just like, hey, just keep pushing. And a lot of times it's hard, but I ain't got a choice. I got to. And Miss Erica, it's just so awesome seeing you in church and bringing the people that you bringing the people that you bring to the church. There's people that you've brought there that are still there, and they're doing awesome things, and they are just eager to do so much more for God and for the church. And it's just powerful. And praise God that your mom called you that day. And it's just so amazing. And Miss Jennifer, I always love talking to you. I put up, just like Daniel said, yes, I put up a facade sometimes. You can't tell, but I have wicked thoughts going through my head. And if I come into the church and I have a conversation with you, I just don't have those thoughts anymore. And it's just a joy just to talk to you, even if you're just laughing at me. And Daniel, man, he's my brother, man. We just sit there and we laugh at each other. We have good conversations with each other. And man, my niece, I have a little niece. She knew that I was going through contemplation of suicide, and she called me one time, and she was just crying. I think she might see this. Hey, Chaz, I love you. And I just want to tell you, there is hope. There's hope in Jesus. I came to Jesus because I wanted freedom. I was on my way back to prison, and I was just tired. I've been through a lot. I had been through a lot, and I just wanted it to stop. That's why I wanted to jump out that window. I was just so tired, and I felt like I didn't have any hope. But when I hit my knees and I prayed, I heard hope in my ear that said everything was going to be okay. And I thank God for that. Even though I go through some of the things that I go through now, I still know that there's hope in Jesus, and he's my strength that'll pull me through. So anybody that's watching, give it a chance. Give it a chance. And you will not regret it. I promise you. And everybody sitting here is a testimony to that.
Praise God. So, Richie, what are the final thoughts you want to add? You mentioned something about a friend or something.
Yes, the hope. And so when I was going through my suicidal stages and whatnot, I didn't see or even consider how God might use my life the way he's using me now. But as a new convert and beginning to learn about salvation, I was working at an apartment complex at the time there on Babcock and 410. And there was a friend of mine that I knew from high school. You know, I used to sell and things like that to him. And I can remember that was the first time I had ever heard God's voice encouraging me to go witness to him. You know, go tell him you got saved. Go tell him you're going to church. Go tell him you're a changed person. And at the time, my pride kicked in, and I didn't go witness to him. And so Sunday morning, you know, as every pastor does, they preach sermons on Sunday morning, and that sermon spoke to me directly. So Monday morning, I'm ready. I'm fired up. I went to his apartment, knocked on his door, and his brother answered the door. And I said, "Hey, is Rudy here?" I said, "I need to talk to him." And he put his head down, and he said, "You didn't hear?" I said, "No, what happened?" I said, "I need to talk to him." He goes, "He hung himself over the weekend." And so I carried that for a long time with me. But at the time, I couldn't connect the dots that it was God dealing with me and then my pride and things like that. But I remember as I'm there getting emotional and crying like, "God, you know, I didn't know that was really you," and my pride. I said, "God, that'll never happen again. I'm sorry," for the longest time, speaking to God about that. And so fast forward a few years, Pastor Luis had mentioned, you know, that there was a mother that had killed the two daughters and then herself in the apartment. And back in the day, I used to work at that apartment complex as a maintenance technician. And so it was interesting that, you know, I'm working on a front door to one of the apartments. And so as I'm working on the doors, I'm, you know, small talk with the kids that are running back and forth in the apartment. And I asked them if they went to church. And they said, "Yeah, we go to Grandpa's church." And so I asked them, "So does Mom go to church?" And she says, "No, I haven't been to church." And so God spoke to me as I'm there working on the doorknob and said, "Just tell her your testimony about suicide, just the suicide part. Don't go through with the whole story." And so I shared my experience with her and then asked her if she wanted to pray. And she said, "No, I'm good." And so we're done there, go to the office, submit the paperwork that the work order was done, what materials were used and all that. And then the manager asked me, she goes, "Do you know why you were in that apartment?" I said, "No." She goes, "Yeah, she was trying to commit suicide last night." And so they had called the paramedics. The paramedics had to kick the door in, and they were able to help her out and things like that. And so it was right there and then. I'm not pastoring at the time. I'm just working, being a disciple. God was preparing me then for the platform that I'm on now. And so it is a tremendous privilege, especially when I do my revivals. I do pray for people that are battling with oppression, depression, suicide, and not knowing where they're at, but God does. That's why God says, "I want you to pray for this." Prayed for a young man in Globe, Arizona years ago, was going through mind battles of committing suicide and whatnot. Was able to pray with them. I'm about to fly out, come back home. And they asked, "Hey, can you go pray for him?" I said, "Yeah, we'll go pray for him right before we go to the airport." Made time for him, invested in him, and he ended up giving his life to Jesus. And so to do what I do now as an evangelist, and the point being, all the pain and the struggle that I've been through, whether it was a product of a rape and the bad decisions that I made, generational curses, all those issues combined. Yes, they were painful at times and different things like that, but all of those things that God allowed me to go through, he was there with me. And therefore, I'm able to connect, as all of us are, we're able to connect to a lot of people that do not know about Jesus. They have not experienced the freedom and the hope that we've experienced. And I think that's the misconception with a lot of people that are living for God, in the sense that, well, you know, I wouldn't be able to connect with people. You'd be surprised if you've been through it and you share your stories with some of these people. You would be surprised at how much of an impact your story will make on these people and give them hope. If you could just be with me when we're at the Bible conference in Prescott, and people are looking for me, they find me, you know, as your wife here. And yes, I introduce them to my wife, and they'll just say, thank you for releasing your husband to come and minister in our church. He didn't know this was going on in our life, but God used him. He gave us this word. And a lot of those words, a lot of them are coming from the pains and the struggles that I've been through personally, in our marriage and raising kids. Those are all painful and struggles and things like that. But when it's all said and done, you know, giving someone a word that was contemplating suicide, and, you know, later they tell the pastor, you know, he read my mail. And so I'm on the plane coming back home, getting emotional. It's like, man, God, that you would use my life now, considering all the things that I had been through back in the early days. And he said, but Richard, I was preparing you then for what you're doing now. And so if this was going to be my last podcast or last few words, I'll say, listen, you need to stay focused on God, and don't think it's strange when God begins to whisper in your ear. Listen, you need to tell him what I've done in your life since the last time you had thoughts of suicide or financial struggles. The devil's not going to tell you to go and witness to them or give them the hope. It's always going to be God. And if you open your mouth and speak the words of hope that God has given you since you've given your life to Jesus, it'll change their lives.
Powerful, powerful. Erica, any last words that you want to add before we go into the? I want to focus on the hope after this.
Okay. One thing I would say is, I think a lot of stuff that we all have in common is having these expectations. And they're all good expectations or good imaginations, dreams, you know, things that we desire, and then, you know, they're not fulfilled, that we feel kind of let down. And for those who have struggled with the suicide end of it, that's what kind of drives that, as well as our family members that also, you know, or loved ones that have gone through with it. It's because, you know, what they expected wasn't fulfilled and stuff. So I would say something that's very important to me that I've learned is watch who you put your trust in, or who you put your trust in. One thing my pastor always says is, like, I get it. You know, we've been violated, we've been hurt, but you gotta trust someone. And I learned that the hard way. I should have trusted my pastor of everyone. But, you know, violations and stuff like that from men in my life, my dad, stepdad, all these things that, you know, I'm looking at him and I'm kind of like, I don't know, you're just a man, and I don't know. But I didn't understand, you know, the man of God part, the fatherly love that I hadn't yet experienced. And he's been the closest to that, that I can relate now to my Heavenly Father. Like, no, it's pure, it's a different thing, and it requires discipline, and it requires accountability, and it requires, you know, these things. So my point in saying, you know, the who you put your trust in, towards a certain crowd, using that terminology, you've really gotta peep game. You've gotta see who, no one's gonna look out for you the way you can look out for you, and the way the people of God can look out for you. like ultimately because people are going through things themselves and you become convenient for them. And, y'all become reliant on each other and y'all use each other and y'all squeeze the life out of each other. And I would just encourage for anyone who's watching, like, make sure that you have a church that you're able to. I know that's more directed towards hope, but it's like it plays a big part in being out there in the world and you trying to sort things out in your mind. It's not that it's hopeless. It's not that these expectations that you have are bad or you're just worthless or, you're not good enough. It's because you need a certain type of people to pull that goodness out of you because it's there.
Good stuff. Jennifer, any last words before we go into the hope part of this?
I just think that, that's pretty much it. It really depends on who you surround yourself, what kind of people you surround yourself with. For example, me, at the time when I went through all of this, my friends were no good. Had I had friends in church, people who cared, who knew more, I would have been, probably in a better place. So I think it's just very important, who you surround yourself with.
Absolutely. Daniel, any last words before we go into the whole part?
Yeah. So I just want to throw out there that to the Christian out there that well, first off, I don't think people realize how big of an issue suicide is. So, nearly close to around like 800,000 people commit suicide a year worldwide. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of people who...
Especially now during the pandemic and everything.
It might be even higher.
It is.
Yeah. So
I've checked into it. It is.
So, that's a lot of people that lose hope on life. So, what I can say to the Christian out there is, to family and friends, is to make sure that you are that example to them, that you're living righteous, that you're living a godly life, that you're, that you live it in your everyday life, because your family will know it. They'll recognize it. They'll come to you when they come into, when they do have these kind of desperate times, or they are feeling hopeless or lost. We've had lots of family, me and my wife, that we always get calls when they're in their lowest. You know what I mean? Because we tried to set that example, like I said. So, with my brother, that was one of the things that brings me comfort, is knowing that in his moment of desperation, he called me out of anybody, and he wanted to pray for salvation. So, to everybody, just plant those seeds, live the life, so you're an example to these people, so they know where to go when those feelings and those emotions start to haunt them.
I think one of the as we go into the whole part of this, I think one of the important factors that we need to remember, whether you're on the receiving end of suicide or you're the person that has entertained suicide in the past, attempted it, whatever. I think we all can agree tonight that we're going to say the hope is in Jesus. And I agree 100%. But that kind of puts it all in a nutshell. That's a little bit too simple. I think part of it is speaking about it. Mm-hmm. I think a big part of the hope that we have is, like I told Jennifer, is you need to talk about it. You cannot, the devil thrives in darkness and obscurity. And when we keep these things to ourselves, and that's why I asked Jennifer, how do you feel now that you spoke about it? Because, there's something empowering that God does when we reveal these things. And I think a large part of our hope is knowing that you can talk about it, that you don't have to be ashamed, about it, about what you did, about your actions. One is talking about it. Two, from the perspective that Daniel comes from, which is having to dealing with the after effect of a family member or loved one that committed suicide. I believe a lot of it is talking about it too. You know what I mean? It's being able to voice it out and and speak out the hope. You know what I mean? That, like he said, my hope is, my belief and my hope is that, you know what, in that last moment, God did something. You know what? It's good to voice that out because we're affirming something that we're believing God for. And God, and when God's involved, God gives us that peace as we speak that you know what, that is right. And so those things aside, the hope that we will all agree on, and I think everyone that's out there viewing, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a person that's not church, doesn't go to church, or you're a person that goes to church every once in a while, or maybe you're just a person out in the world living your life however it is that you live it, you've heard it here today. The alcohol doesn't work.
No.
The drugs don't work.
Alcohol just, all that only amplifies it.
So alcohol, drugs don't work. Putting your faith in people doesn't work. Putting your faith in money, whatever it is, these things don't work. But everyone here can agree, and they're all different perspectives of life, from the attempted suicide to considering suicide to friends committing suicide to family and loved ones committing suicide, is the hope. The hope is Jesus.
Amen.
Because every dynamic of life that you could ever experience, every sin you could ever committed, every shameful thing, every dark thought, every dark deed, everything that could bring shame or a discouragement or dissatisfaction to your life, if from the world perspective, it is fulfilled in true joy through Christ. One, two is you'll never experience that unless you actually give God a chance. You know what I'm saying? And I think the implication here, because I'm sure you've read it. I'm sure Casey's read it. You've done research. People say suicide is a disease. And you know what? And we say it's a spiritual thing. You know what? Let's give you the fact that it's a disease. Jesus came to heal all diseases.
Amen.
Not only can Jesus heal diseases, he is not only Jehovah, Jireh provider. He is Jehovah Rapha, our healer, and beyond the disease, set people free from demonic affliction, demonic oppression. And so, from whatever perspective you want to look at it, Jesus Christ is the hope.
Amen.
That's what he came. That's why he shed his blood. That's why he died. He rose again on the third day. Is to give us hope to life, which when we can teeter around with it, back and forth, argue, different things, you'll never see the true impact of God's power until you give him a chance. We give everything a chance. We give people chances. We give jobs chances. We give, people say, are you going to be happy with $1 million? You're not going to be happy with $1 million. Well, I just want a chance to find out if it's true, and so, and then you find out that it's not true. You hear songs from Justin Bieber where he's got everything, yet he is alone. You know what I mean? And yet he has a Christian background. It comes down to giving Jesus Christ a solid chance. And I repeat this all the time. I say this all the time. I preach this all the time. I say this at parole all the time, and that is, give God a solid chance, man. No matter what you're going through, what
Amen.
you've been through, give him one solid chance to prove himself real. And if he's not real, you'll see it. You can go on with your life. But the reality is that if you give him a solid chance, he'll prove himself real. And we are all, in case he said it, we're all testimonies of that. We are all testimonies of that. And these are different perspectives, different ways of lives, different walks of lives. Yet we all come to the ultimate conclusion at the end of everything, at the end of the attempted suicide, at the end of the click, at the end of the phone call, at the end of the impact of our loved ones, committing suicide. We all come to the same conclusion. You know what? The hope is in Jesus.
Amen.
And aside from that, that's why we're hopeless. You know what I'm saying? And so I want you in your own words. I don't know if Casey wants to go first. In your own words, just add what is the hope? Promote the hope.
Well, before I had no hope. I had no hope, and I was just lost. I'm a deep thinker, and I'm a constant thinker. I still do. I just deal with it a lot better now because I received Jesus. I opened my heart and I let him in because I had a lot of bad things in there. It took a lot to get it all out. But, man, what I have now is just so much better than what I did have. And I don't want it back. Satan can have it. I don't want it. And I would have never got it if I would have never opened my heart. What I tell people all the time, I tell whenever I talk to them and I try to get them to come to church, I say God doesn't want to control your life. He just merely wants to collaborate with you in order for you to be the best version of yourself. And I hope to reach people with that. So I want to say this, if whatever you're going through, if you're going through something, man, drop us a comment. Drop us a comment and let us know how we can get a hold of you. Somebody will talk to you. We check the comments. We check the comments, and if you're looking for hope, it's in Jesus, and we can help you with that. We can help you to where you can open your heart and you can let him in. So don't be ashamed. Don't be scared. And this is coming from somebody that doesn't talk much. You see me on this podcast. I don't talk much. They can attest to that. I don't talk that often, but I just want people to know that, hey, don't do it. Somebody loves you. We love you. We don't even know you, but we love you, and Jesus loves you, and he is your hope. He is your strength. So just like Pastor said, give it a chance. Give him a chance, and you won't regret it. I promise.
Richie, if there's anything you want to add, if not, if you already said it, you're good.
27 years ago, a brother in the church challenged me. I was still wet behind the ears, didn't know which way was right or up. And he said, Richard, you've already tried the alcohol, the drugs, everything else. He goes, why don't you give Jesus 6 months? And at the end of the 6 months, you tell me what God has done in your life. And at the time, I thought, 6 months came up. He said, what did God do for you? And I couldn't see it spiritually. I said, he hasn't done anything. And then he reminded me, he asked a question. He said, how many times did they postpone your court date? And I said, 3 times. He goes, you see, that's a miracle right there. So he was the one that helped me as I was getting my feet, on the right track as far as living for God. But to remember what the alcohol, the drugs, the girlfriends, the money, what all of those things could not do, here is something that God has been doing in my life for the last 27 years. Is in addition to the bonus is if I die unexpectedly, I know I'm going to make heaven my home. Being committed to the things of God, so now our kids are living for God. So that's another blessing. Our grandson's going to be living for God as well. So there's many more perks and blessings just being committed to the things of God. If you would have told me 27 years ago, Richard, you're going to be preaching around the world, you're going to be praying for people, the big eye-opener or shock for me when I would call out for people who had contemplated suicide, things like that, in different churches in our fellowship. Sometimes it would be the pastor, sometimes it would be the pastor's wife. Would get up from behind the drums and come up for prayer. At one time, it was a pastor's son, maybe about 11 or 12 years old, there in song service that came up for prayer. And so the hope is in the midst of all of my problems and generational curses, by me simply just saying, God, I'm already tired of what the world is offering. So whatever you have for me, I'm all in. I don't have a plan B. This is all I do. My kids and my wife will tell you this is all we've been doing for the last 27 years, and I don't have a plan B. And that's why we're able to experience the miracles in people's lives where they're actually changing. And I've even had people that from years ago when they were actually in our church, when we were pastoring, years have gone by, and then they'll call me back and they'll say, just want to say thank you for your testimony on living for God and just encouraging me to keep my faith in God, that he's not going to just leave me without anything. And so it's just a big privilege to see how far God will go with you if you allow him to come into your heart. And the best advice I can give you is this: God always has your best interest in mind, but he's not going to force himself on you. You need to open the door and allow him to come into your heart. And that was the one decision I made 27 years ago. And so not only has my life changed, but I'm blessed. I've been married to my wife now 26 years. And because of that decision, even our kids are blessed. And so the blessings just keep coming on in over the last 27 years. I don't know about you, but that's an opportunity of a lifetime. My mother didn't raise, dumb kids, unless they were my 3 younger brothers, but that's a deal of a lifetime. God, you want all of my problems and you're going to give me your blessings. I said, I'll take that any day.
Powerful, Erica.
Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." So when I had came back to Live for God, January, I literally was just going off of hope alone. I had did everything in my power, and I had some help, of course, with others and influences, but to tear my life apart. And I succeeded. I came back. I was homeless. I had to humble myself. My family doesn't come from, living homeless in shelters. All this stuff. It was basically, I had to humble myself, and I had to say, you are no better. You are a drug addict. You are this. You are that. You are sexually immoral. You're lost. And there is no plan B, like the way Pastor Valerio said. There can't be any plan B. You've already exercised or tried all of it. So the hope that I had was that I had lives, testimonies in front of me that have succeeded. And so I exercised faith every single day. And I said, I am going to obtain these things. I am going to rebuild the life that I tore down. Another proverb that I love is a wise woman builds her home, but a foolish one tears it down with her own hands. So I exercise faith every single day since I have been back, and I have seen God move supernaturally. The stories that you hear, the testimonies you hear of blessing, I've experienced that. And I am out of a shelter. I have a home. My home's been filled with everything that I had lost and more. I now have stuff invading my apartment with baby stuff because I have a little one on the way. And I have a vehicle that was dropped in my lap by the people of God that ultimately they sacrificed, and everything else in my home as well that people have contributed to. But it wasn't easy. It was every day exercising that faith and only hoping for things that I did not yet see. I rode the bus in the rain to go to church. My pastor said, you want to come to church that bad? Then you prove it. The proof will be in the pudding. And he said, be at my house and, my wife will give you a ride. Be at the parking lot. And I did what it took because I understood that when you want more for your life, you've already exercised everything. You've already tried all other options. So I would say if there's any bit of heart for hope in you, take it every day, one day at a time, and say, God, I need you.
Surrender.
If there's a God, I need you. And I knew that there was a God. I just, and I continue to live every day going forward with that. And I've seen God provide supernaturally. So I would encourage y'all, if y'all truly do and y'all don't leave no thought of, there being a plan B or other options to tap out, y'all will be all right. Y'all will see your creator and the purposes in which he created you for.
Jennifer, any last words of hope?
I think they pretty much said it all. I would just like to add that, yes, if you give Christ a chance and you understand his love for you, you see things totally different from a different perspective, because no longer are you, after all the rejection, the betrayal, it doesn't matter, because God accepts you the way you are, and that's what ultimately matters.
Amen.
And so once you understand that, everything else doesn't matter anymore, and you have to remember that everything you do it to honor God, and you will see the blessing.
Amen.
Yep. Once you understand that, embrace it, you do it. Perfect. That's awesome. Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, so I guess my words for hope to somebody feeling lost or suicidal or anything is it comes from a perspective of somebody who never felt suicidal. You know, I never felt like taking my life, but it's somebody that is saved. So it's from a Christian perspective, and the hope that I have is in the afterlife and being in heaven with Jesus, being in heaven with family that have passed away that I believe made it to heaven. You know, having hope and faith, you know, that my wife, you know, she's saved, so hopefully. So
That's a big hopefully. We'll edit that out.
So, my kids, you know, we're raising my kids, my 2 daughters, we're raising them in Christ. And so I go through life not afraid of death, not afraid to die. But I have faith and hope that if I do die, and if my daughters or my wife or my parents who are saved, that if they pass away, we'll see each other in heaven.
Absolutely.
Amen.
I'll see my mom, and I'll see hopefully some of my other family members in heaven. That's the hope
Yeah.
that I have.
That's the driving hope behind it. Powerful podcast today. Very sobering.
Yes.
You know, and I want to thank each and every one of you, Richie,
Yes, thank you so
Erica,
much,
Jennifer, Daniel, for coming.
You got me.
We got you. We got you in front of the
I
camera.
cried.
Privileged.
Hey. Hey, man, but it's going to impact stuff that people are going to get help. And I just want to encourage everybody, you know, like Casey said, drop us a comment. Come visit us. Come visit us. The Potter's House Christian Church, Universal City, Texas, 2025 Universal City Boulevard, Universal City, Texas, 78148. You know, hit us up. The Choosing Hope Foundation, our church website, website is universalcitychurch.com, right? Still?
Right now.
universalcitychurch.com. You can go to lifespeakspodcast.com. Just there's ways of getting a hold of us, comments, whatever. Come visit us at church. We want to help you. And if you're out there, man, don't let nothing stop you from getting the help that you need before it goes any further. And so with that, appreciate everybody here
Thank you.
tonight. And we're going to be signing out. Next one, we'll catch you there.